Will you share the recording of this session on LinkedIn or on your website, or what's your plan?
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel in the One Planet Network, so we will put it there, and then yeah, also share it on the website and through our social media, I guess, if that's
Okay.
fine with everyone.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I see Ulf is now also here. Ulf, do you want to quickly check if your audio and video is working?
If you hear me now, then that should be okay.
Yeah, great. All perfect.
Okay.
Okay, I think then we can
Good
pretty
morning,
much
everybody.
start. Yeah, good morning. Start right away.
Good morning.
Still a few more people coming in, but I'll start with the introduction and everything. So yeah, hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar organized by the One Planet Network Consumer Information Program and United Nations Environment Program and Consumers International. My name is Nils Heuer. I coordinate the One Planet Network Consumer Information Program, and I work for UN Environment Program. Today we want to speak about 3 key messages for consumer information on plastic packaging that we developed in the last couple of months. And we're happy to have you all join us for this session, and also some exciting expert speakers. Next slide, please. Yeah, before we start, just an overview of today's session and also some instructions. So all attendees are on mute, so but you can use the chat or question function if you have any technical issues or also questions that you want to raise for the discussion later. So please send something in if you have a question. And for the session today, I'll start with an overview of the Can I Recycle This report that we launched last year, and that is kind of the foundation for the work that we've done in the follow-up. I'll also give a bit of background about the Consumer Information Program and One Planet Network, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Nishita from Consumers International, who has led the development of the key messages that we present today. And then after that, we will take comments from 3 key experts of the 3 stakeholder groups that we've addressed with the key messages, and hear their opinion on the key messages we developed and also their insights on the topic. And finally, we'll have an open panel discussion with the 3 experts again. And also, yeah, we have some questions prepared, but would also appreciate to hear additional questions from you to take up in the discussion. So yeah, just about the speakers today, I already introduced myself, and yeah, as I said, Nishita from Consumers International has been leading the development of the key message papers. And then we have the 3 experts today is Anne-Sophie from Quantis. She's a senior communications and engagement lead. And then we have Ulf Jackal from the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety in Germany, and also Brooke Donnelly, CEO of the Australian Packaging Covenant Organization. So thank you all for joining today, and look forward to discussion with you later. Next slide, please. Just to give a bit of background of who is organizing this event and develop the work. So we are part of the One Planet Network. The One Planet Network was set up in 2012 at the Rio Plus 20 conference as a framework to advance on sustainable consumption and production. So it's also recognized as a Sustainable Development Goal 12. 12.1 is focused on the implementation of this 10-year framework of programs that is now termed the One Planet Network. And we are in this group representing the Consumer Information Program. Next slide, please. And in our program, we are very much focused on supporting the provision of quality information on goods and services, and also to develop effective strategies to engage consumers in sustainable consumption. So our aspirational target is to work towards companies providing credible sustainability information on at least 50% of the products and services at the point of sale. I think it's very ambitious, but that's what we want to achieve, and just make it a norm that credible sustainability information is available to consumers. So we don't only focus on plastic packaging, we really focus on all types of communication. And our program is co-led by Consumers International, which is also very heavily involved in the work on plastic packaging. And then the German Federal Ministry for Environment, with Wolf also speaking today, and also the Indonesian Ministry for Environment and Forestry. And you can find more information on our website, and also reach us on cascp@un.org if you wish to join the network. We have about over 100 partners, and yeah, always welcome to add new members to our group. Next slide, please. Now about the report that I mentioned that we developed last year. It's called Can I Recycle This? A Global Mapping and Assessment of Standards, Labels and Claims on Plastic Packaging. It was published by UN Environment Program and Consumers International, and also as an output of the Consumer Information Program. And it focused on on-package communications to consumers about the sustainability of plastic packaging. So we had a look at labels, claims, and also the standards and certifications behind them, and yeah, with a geographically global focus. So we looked around, all around the globe, and yeah, we found a lot of information. Next slide, please. And basically, in terms of the methodology that we used in the report, so as I said, we did a mapping and yeah, identified these labels and claims in plastic packaging, and we categorized them. And what we found is that there's a lot of different types of sustainability information communicated. So around the compostability of plastic packaging, biodegradability, recyclability, of course, recycled content, but also, for example, bio-based plastics or even like ocean-bound plastics. So lots of different types of information being communicated to consumers, and we then developed that into a comprehensive catalog that we asked 33 experts on consumer rights, packaging, labeling, and standards to assess and evaluate. And next slide, please. Just to give a bit of background on the assessment. Here we referenced our guidelines for providing product sustainability information. That is a key output of our program as well, that we launched in 2017, published by UN Environment and also the International Trade Center. And in these guidelines that were also developed in a multi-stakeholder process in the program, we defined 10 principles that should be adhered to when communicating product sustainability information. And in those, we have the 5 fundamental principles and 5 aspirational principles that should be aspired to. But the 5 fundamental principles, we argue, should always be met when you communicate sustainability information. And these are reliability, relevance, clarity, transparency, and accessibility. And these 5 fundamental principles were then kind of used as the reference frame for the assessment of the 31 labels, for example, that we had in the report, Can I Recycle This? And when our experts evaluated that, they found that only about 19% of the labels kind of met these 5 principles quite well, and the rest of them were either receiving like neutral or mixed opinions or even negative scores. So it shows that there's a lot of room for improvement in communicating sustainability information on plastic packaging. Next slide, please. And finally, just to give also you an overview of the 5 key recommendations that we developed or recommended in the report. And these are that, first of all, we thought that businesses, but in a way also standard setters and labeling organizations, should follow the guidelines for providing product sustainability information in their plastic packaging communications. Then we also argue that definitions about content and disposal of plastic packaging need to be harmonized at a global level. And standards, labels, and claims need to better reflect actual conditions. That's particularly relevant for example, compostability or recyclability, where we found that that often is not the case. And then 4th recommendation is that the use of the cherishing arrow symbol should be restricted to indicating recyclability. And finally, that informative and verified recycling labels that we've seen a few examples of in the report should be adopted and in the proper use enforced more globally. And now I'm handing over to Nishita to explain a bit more how we built on these 5 recommendations and develop the key messages for the 3 different stakeholders.
Thank you, Nils. Can you hear me firstly?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. All right, well, thank you, and good morning to everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining the webinar. I'm Nishita Choudhury, the Sustainable Consumption Program Assistant at Consumers International, and I assist in the coordination of the Consumer Information Program. I am really pleased to be joining you here today, and we'll be taking you through an overview of our recently launched key messages for businesses, governments, and standard setters and labeling organizations, including the practical action points and key findings. And we're also very proud to be joined by a range of speakers who will be sharing their insights on the messages, and I will introduce each of them later. To provide a little background, the findings of the Can I Recycle This report, published in May 2020, highlights that work is needed to improve communications about materials, production, recyclability, and disposal of plastic packaging. These newly launched key messages provide action points around each of the 5 recommendations and were refined through an extensive stakeholder consultation process that included focus group sessions, several expert interviews, and further online consultations with our program members, with experts from across the globe in government, businesses, civil societies, consumer groups, and standards and labeling organizations. We know many of you have joined us here on the webinar today and would like to extend a thank you for your help and participation. The key messages provide practical action points for businesses, government, standard setters, and labeling organizations to help each improve the landscape of sustainability communications on plastic packaging. On-package labels and claims and the standards that guide them are a critical element of consumer communications, especially for reducing leakage and contamination. We can go to the next slide, please. I am now going to begin with our key messages for businesses. These key messages were developed to assist business leaders, encourage business action and collaboration to improve consumer information and encourage a more circular economy for plastic packaging. Next slide, please. So our first key message is for businesses to adopt consumer information tools that are fully aligned with the principles of the guidelines for providing product sustainability information. Hereafter the guidelines. And as Nils mentioned, this is a report that was launched in 2017 by UNEP and the International Trade Center with fundamental and aspirational principles on how to provide trustworthy and effective sustainability information on products. In all of our key messages, we advocate that these principles are adhered to provide effective sustainability information on plastic packaging. We identified in our report many instances of information and imagery that cause consumer confusion and mistrust, from the use of the chasing arrows designed for labels and claims other than for recyclability, or communications that are not localized and therefore not actionable for consumers. Forming partnerships can help to develop localized communication for plastic packaging. The Australasian recycling label is supported by the Packaging Recyclability Valuation Portal PREP, which assesses each piece of packaging against the number of people that can recycle it via their council collection, and the imagery on pack is consistent. The recyclable, conditionally recyclable, and not recyclable is separated visually, which helps consumers to recognize the labels and understand the recycling instructions. This meets the principles of collaboration, clarity, relevance, and accessibility, as in the guidelines. With an increasing amount of consumer transactions occurring online, consumers often do not know if a product packaging is made from plastic, whether it's reusable, or how to dispose of it. Businesses need to inform consumers about the packaging used and their sustainability ahead of purchasing. For instance, the packaging star label in New Zealand is a label not printed onto packaging, but shown on the websites of grocery and brands, and lets consumers know which packaging is made from recycled materials, which packaging can be separated, and which brands are committed to improving their packaging, thereby helping consumers to make informed purchasing decisions whilst online. Next slide, please. If consumers have a better understanding about the concept of the circular economy and hierarchy of different solutions proposed to tackle plastic pollution, this can encourage behavior change towards more effective solutions and increase their responsiveness to labels and claims on plastic packaging. Packaging can be redesigned to facilitate reuse and recycling, and this should be clearly communicated to the consumer through labeling or further digital information. In 2019, the restaurant company Wagamama, in response to consumer feedback that not all UK councils can recycle black plastic, redesigned their takeout packaging from black to grey and communicated that the plastic bowls can be reused through the slogan, "When you're done, I rinse, reuse and recycle." Businesses can also collaborate with governments to run campaigns to increase awareness around what certain labels and claims stand for, or do this as part of their marketing efforts. Business action through better educating and informing consumers alongside labeling and other communication efforts will help guide consumers in the marketplace and increase their responsiveness to sustainability information on plastic packaging. Next slide, please. The following key messages aim to assist governments to improve and promote consumer information on plastic packaging to progress towards a more circular economy for plastic. Next slide, please. Sustainability information on packaging is barely regulated, leading to a great variety of communication with different levels of credibility. This can cause consumer confusion and mistrust even towards credible consumer information. Governments can regulate to ensure that consumer information available in the market is aligned with the principles of the guidelines to prevent consumer confusion and mistrust. Firstly, consumers presume that on-pack labels about disposal are relevant and applicable to their local waste collection, but this is not always the case. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation defines that a packaging or packaging component is recyclable if it is proven to work in practice and at scale. Governments should aim to collect annual recyclability rate data in their country. This can help companies to utilize this information in labels and other consumer information tools and ensure any recyclable claim is accurate and locally relevant to consumers. Member states of the Basel Convention will start to report data on plastic collection and recycling rates from 2022. Additionally, legislation can help to tackle misleading communications. Two examples identified in the Can I Recycle This report is the green dot logo and the outdated but still widely used resin identification codes. Both use the chasing arrows in their design but do not indicate recyclability for consumers. This is a problematic but fairly widespread practice. In 2013, the resin codes were updated from a triangle of 3 chasing arrows to an enclosed triangle. Legislation should be updated to enforce the use of the new enclosed triangular design, and Oregon has become the first state in the US to propose such a change. And in France, it is no longer mandatory for the green dot logo to be used. This can help to reduce consumer confusion and better enable the correct disposal of plastic packaging. Next slide, please. Improper use of labels or claims can also result in greenwashing. Regulating against this will mean improved practices and communications from businesses on plastic packaging. The US Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and the Green Marketing and the Australian Consumer Law have developed guides as a response to false business claims. Furthermore, regulations which set definitions for common on-package sustainability claims would reduce greenwashing and the use of terms that consumers find confusing and difficult to compare. In February 2020, France approved a law on the circular economy, which forbids companies from using the word biodegradable on packaging unless they could prove it is suitable for domestic composting. This will mean improved practices and communications from businesses on plastic packaging, leading to less consumer confusion, better comparability of claims, and empower consumers to take the right action. Next slide, please. Governments can promote campaigns that inform consumers on the content of labels and claims and the actions that they should take. For instance, highlight what a misleading claim is and how consumers can report these to relevant bodies in their area. The government of Rwanda have been raising awareness among local businesses and consumers on the benefits of using recycled plastics to strengthen the circular economy. And since 2019 in Brazil, Sao Paulo's Town Hall Initiative campaign, Recycla Sampa, structured upon the 5 R's: rethink, reduce, reuse, refuse, and recycle, has been encouraging sustainable habits among citizens. Repeated awareness-raising campaigns targeting consumers to understand the sustainability information displayed on plastic packaging will encourage them to tackle greenwashing and help consumers to contribute towards a more circular plastics economy. Next slide, please. The following key messages aim to assist standard setters and labeling organizations to promote clear communication and action for consumers that can help them to make more sustainable consumption choices and understand how to properly dispose of plastic packaging. Next slide, please. Harmonized definitions used in standards and consumer information labels to ensure a consistent landscape of standards for claims on plastic packaging. As mentioned previously, a definition of recyclability should refer to its application in practice and at scale. Examples of waste recycling labeling schemes which incorporate local accessibility data of waste collection facilities can be found in Singapore, South Africa, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Labels on pack which reflect the local conditions will help increase consumer trust and proper disposal of packaging. Additionally, in most countries, the required systems for composting do not exist at scale. There is a risk that plastics which are technically compostable or biodegradable are not treated in this way and may leak into the environment. Classifications around sustainable packaging could be clearer, and international standards set which ensure composting and biodegradation do work in practice and at scale. A new British standard for biodegradable plastic has been introduced, which hopes to standardize confusing legislation for consumers, and biodegradable products meeting the standards will contain a recycle by date to ensure consumers have disposed of the packaging before it starts to break down. Next slide, please. The assessment in the Can I Recycle This report showed that only 19% of assessed labels give consumers quality information to make informed recycling and purchasing decisions. Developing labels which adhere to the principles of the guidelines report can help to create a more consistent market for consumers and decrease consumer confusion. In addition to the key messages, we have developed 5 case studies of good examples of labels on plastic packaging, which support consumers in their purchase, use, and disposal. The labels, which you can see on the screen, have been identified as good examples as they align with the guidelines' fundamental principles: reliability, relevance, clarity, transparency, and accessibility. For instance, WWF South Africa's on-pack recycling label's use of the chasing arrows only indicates recyclability and recognizes that most packaging has more than one element of composition with different implications for its recyclability. And the logo for reduced packaging in Singapore supports businesses in reviewing their packaging designs and provides consumers with products with reduced packaging, which is clearly communicated on the label. On-pack labeling does have its limitations in terms of the availability of space and possibilities to share information with consumers. Standard setters and labeling organizations can embrace scannable digital technology, for instance, barcodes and QR codes, to build on-package communications and provide further sustainability information to consumers. Digital technology can support on-pack labeling by expanding outreach and providing additional information on recycling guidance and proper use and disposal of plastic packaging to consumers. The Bearpack app in Singapore enables consumers to choose Bearpack's reusable containers when choosing takeaway in-store or for delivery via the app. This can then be returned in person or to any partner restaurants. This aligns with the principles of transparency, accessibility, and multi-channel and innovative approach, and increases progress towards sustainable solutions for a more circular economy of plastic packaging. However, the local context in terms of access to digital technology must be considered, and the fundamental information should be accessible to all consumers offline as well as online. Next slide, please. And now I would like to welcome our guest speakers who are experts in product labeling, recycling, plastic packaging, and consumer information in general. So first off to Anne-Sophie Vauquer, who is the Senior Communications and Engagement Lead at Qantas, and is going to make some comments from the business perspective on our key messages for businesses. So Anne-Sophie, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Nishita. Hello, everybody. So Qantas International is a sustainability consultancy working on sustainability metrics, strategy, and communication and engagement strategies. Thank you very much for your kind invitation for this very important matter. I would like to start by making just a few comments. Now that we are still in this COVID-19 period, what we have seen is the increasing use of single-use plastics, and that there's been a lot of reports about this, the increasing volumes of plastic packaging that EPR scheme sorting plants recyclers have to deal with today. That said, sorry, there is a very encouraging study done by BCG that I wanted to mention, that was done actually last year, at the end of last year, that says that's basically for quite a big number of respondents, over 3,000 across different countries in the world, increasing and improving the recycling and composting is actually the second most quoted action that consumers would like to do post-COVID, or within COVID at least, which is very encouraging. So it means that this is a very important topic for consumers. They're very concerned about the greater use of plastic packaging, and they want to do something about it. So this is something that, as you are well aware, businesses and many brands have started looking into this. First of all, because there's a very big trend of a willingness from different brands and companies to position their products on eco-design. They are seeing how important this is becoming for many consumers to buy more sustainable products, and they would like to obviously use every effort made in eco-design to advertise these efforts. So there's a greater willingness that we see among our clients and a lot of brands that we work with to communicate more and more information about disposal and recyclability of the packaging. And this is very positive, because obviously this willingness is really triggering a lot of questions. And the second point is that businesses are recognizing that they are missing knowledge about the end of life of the products. What are the products becoming? What is the packaging going into sorting and then recycling? What is it transformed into? What type of products is it made of once it's sorted and recycled, etc.? Many companies that we see are asking us questions about this. They recognize that the topic is highly complex. It's actually very local too, and they do not usually have the internal knowledge to really tackle this. There's a huge search for information at this time, and this is also revealed by the recent consultancy services promoted by Suez, for example, that really support companies to have a better level of understanding and awareness of packaging and of life. So this missing knowledge internally is really triggering a lot of questions before doing anything on consumer communication on pack and off pack, which is something that we see as a trend. The third trend we see is that there's also more and more awareness about the risks of misleading consumers with wrong communications and greenwashing claims, especially the 100% recyclable claim that we usually see on pack. This is more and more understood that there are consequences of misleading consumers with wrong communications. There are obviously a lot of cases that we see nowadays in the media. For example, Amazon in 2018 with biodegradable claims costing $1.5 million. Or in France, for example, the recent case between Materne and Andros on a PP pouch recyclability claim. So all in all, the third trend that we see is that there's also a clear link with regulations, the regulatory space, the legal space, and the recognition that brands need to be extra careful when making recyclability claims, and in more general terms, sustainability claims related to packaging and plastic packaging. So all in all, what you have developed with the B2B, the business key messages are absolutely welcome. We are actually building for many clients internal guidance to help marketeers and communication people to really raise their level of awareness on these topics. And the first part, which is sustainability information and imagery, have to be clear and relevant. That's absolutely fundamental, and you have said it also in the presentation. One of the last decisions that we saw was in France, the removal of the green dot, which has been causing many problems and many confusion in consumers' mind for many years. The example you're showing about the triangles with chasing arrows is also a very nice example, and we are also promoting this in the same manner to business clients, and say that this should absolutely not be placed, for example, next to Mobius loop on packaging. So all of these things are things that we know from experience about on-pack messaging for consumers, and this is now becoming more and more known, and hopefully more known in the future. What I wanted to mention also is an example of guidance documents that is publicly available that we've put together for the cosmetics sector. It's clearly inspired from the work that you are doing in Wild Planet Web Network and the recent report that you have shared. I think the compilation of labels, standards, and claims that you have put together is extremely useful and very, very comprehensive. And this guidance that I'm mentioning is for the cosmetics sector, where we actually go one step further, which is to provide claims that are recommended and claims not recommended, and why. Because that's what communities of marketeers and communication people need to understand. because sometimes the science behind such claims or the actual reality of what this means is misunderstood or not even known. So this is one example I wanted to mention for SPICE, which is called the Sustainable Packaging for Cosmetic. That is a consortium led by L'Oreal and Qantas. And the last point, maybe before I leave the floor to the other speakers, is the second message you have on sustainability information on the e-commerce platform is absolutely key. There's usually e-commerce has just completely escaped from the discussion so far on what information should be displayed on e-commerce platforms when you shop online. And I think this is extremely welcome to have this guidance from you. So this is really something that we will, as a consultancy, encourage moving forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne-Sophie. And now over to Ulf Jackel, Head of Division at the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, to make some comments from the government perspective on our key messages for governments. So Ulf, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Nishita, and I can join in Anne-Sophie in thanking you for putting up a report and also this webinar series. So it makes a lot of sense to talk about how to communicate on recycling issues and identification of plastics and so on. Our experience it's quite a long one. We started already in the 90s of last century with our so-called Töpfer ordinance, the ordinance for the recycling of packaging, where we also introduced extended producer responsibility. So that was legislation which was pretty new, and we approached the consumer also with pretty new things. We gave them yellow bags where they should additionally sort in their lightweight packaging. That was not done before, so it was difficult to communicate to the consumers that it is now necessary also to sort steel cans, to sort aluminum containers, to sort plastic packaging. And we received in the Ministry of Environment, we received thousands of letters a week from citizens which are puzzled by the new approach. And so it was really a communication problem, and we spent a lot of money, and the company organizing that spent a lot of money in telling the consumers how to do that. In that time, the green dot symbol was developed. Yes, it leads to a lot of misunderstanding, in particular when it is used in markets which are not the German market, because the green dot symbol just symbolizes the participation in the green dot system of sorting, collecting, and recycling of packaging on the German market. So they pay money into the system, and the packaging will be recycled. In the meantime, all the companies with all their packaging, and they don't produce packaging for let's say the Czech market or the Polish market or the French market or the German market, they produce it for a European market, for example. So the green dots is on their packaging, even if it's not going to the German market. So that's one of the problems we face. And meanwhile, with globalization, we have this on packaging from Chinese companies, from North and South American companies, and so on. That's really a problem, and the green dot symbol is mostly misunderstood. It's not a sustainability label, but you have to communicate that, and that's pretty difficult. A prerequisite for a proper system and for communication is building trust. If you want the people to sort their packaging in the household, you have to build trust. So meaning that there has to be a system behind which is functioning. So the waste which is sorted in the household and then collected should definitely be recycled, not shipped to somewhere else or whatever, or thrown put on landfills or end up in combustion plants. So if you don't build trust, then people don't sort. So this is also very, very important, and of course a prerequisite. With plastics, there are many advantages of plastic packaging, but there are also disadvantages when you find it in somewhere in the landscape, in waters, and so on. There are, and which makes it even more difficult, different types of plastic. It's lightweight, it's often small, and it's often soiled, and so on. So you have to make sure that even these kind of plastic packaging is recycled, and this is difficult. If you ever have visited a recycling plant, then you see that not every piece of plastic packaging is recycled. You can't do that. If it's too small, it can't be recycled. If it's black, for example, that was the example you mentioned, then it looked like a belt. Like the belt underneath the packaging, and it can't be identified. So yes, black plastic packaging is also very, very difficult. And of course, yes, you have to, when it comes to the government, you have to help people to identify and to give guidance what to do with the plastic packaging. So in which bin should it be placed? And sometimes symbols are needed. Some of the plastic packaging is easy to recognize. Some of it it's not easy to recognize when it's, for example, the difference between coated paper and plastic is not. It's very difficult. And some of the composite packaging where you have a layer of paper around a layer of plastic, and you expect the consumer to sort that. That's really difficult, and you have to use very good symbols which are known to the people. The shading arrow is quite a good one, but if you ask people on the street what are the chasing arrows mean, I would say 80 to 90% don't know. So you have to educate the people. That's also one prerequisite that the system works. What is also important is to fight misleading claims, as it is said in the report. The package is recyclable. This is one of the most used claims. Everything is recyclable. If you think of the physical lessons in physics you might have had in school or whenever. So you can recycle everything, but it won't be done. If you and there it comes to the handling in the waste management sites. For example, in Germany, I visited a waste management site not too long ago. They recycle plastic packaging which is larger than 5 centimeters. So that makes a difference. And the belt is running with a speed of 30 kilometers an hour. You can imagine this is very fast, and even the best identification system is not identifying everything. So this has to be at least linked to each other. And of course, you not only need to have the people participate, but of course companies play a huge role in also marking their products. In Germany, some of the bigger retailers have now started to use symbols to help people in sorting at home. For example, a bottle with an aluminium cap, then you can see visualized on the packaging that the glass bottle has to go in the glass bin, and the aluminium cap in the lightweight packaging bin. So these kind of things are necessary. You can regulate that, and you can also regulate not using false claims, and it depends on the system you have, if you regulate that as a government or not. It's we, for example, in Germany have regulated to help people identify one-use drink packaging from multi-use drink packaging, for example. And we have regulated very recently a marking with one-way use packaging, and these kind of things. You can regulate that, and quite often makes a lot of sense. To sum up, yes, the report addresses, in my view, the most important questions, and very rightly addresses the guidelines for providing consumer information on sustainability issues, which are a clear and good guidance for if you want to regulate as a government. I leave it with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulf. And I will now pass on to Brooke Donnelly, CEO of the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, APCO, to share your perspectives on our key messages for standard setters and labelling organisations. It's great to have you with us, Brooke, and welcome. Over to you.
I'll say good evening to everyone, because it's 8:42 p.m. here in the bottom part of the world, glorious little part of Australia that we're filling in today. But thank you so much for inviting me along, Nishita and the team. We were so pleased to be part of this very important work. We are one of those organisations that is working to really put great labelling out and really help consumers understand how they can be empowered to take part of this transition to a circular economy and what their role might be in that. And one of the key things I think is really important as an organisation in this space is understanding that this is not a task that should be taken on lightly. It's a very, very big and complex piece of work. Tonight we're talking about, or today in some parts of the world, we're talking about it from a consumer perspective, but a really effective labelling program will not only support consumers' understanding, it will also support redesign of packaging for industry, and it will support understanding at a government level as well. So it's really important to appreciate that there's three levels there, and consumers are a key part of that. What has worked really well for us, and what we think is one of the some of the key things when you are setting up these type of labelling programs, is really solid, excellent partnerships. One organisation cannot be all things to all people, and we administer the program and we coordinate the effort towards it in Australia and New Zealand. However, we work really closely with two very key organisations, Prep Design, who provide the excellent Prep Design tool, which is the evidence base for the program and to give industry confidence to make the claims they make. And we also work with a consumer-based environmental organisation organisation here in Australia called Planet Arc, and we actually fund a consumer education program that supports the labelling as well. So it's really key to get the messaging right, to get the labelling right, but to also support that with a really structured long-term commitment to the ongoing maintenance and management of these types of programs. And if we really look at the messaging that's been put together by the team in terms of the guideline, and we look at harmonising definitions, this is a really important area in terms of ensuring that you have very clear definitions, not only that also include the measurement points of where you are measuring recyclability at. Should it be at the sortation, at the collection, at the reprocessing? We take a very conservative approach in Australia, and we actually make sure we measure at the very end point and make sure that the product is not only being collected and the packaging is not only being collected, but it's not actually going to landfill, that it is actually going and being reprocessed. It's also really important that that system reflects what the current capability is. There's always lots of great new ideas and technology and inventions that people want to talk about, but the reality is consumers need to have confidence in the system, and to have that, your messaging needs to reflect the current capability of the system. Whatever one does, do not fall into the trap of technically recyclable. We really need to measure recyclability in numerous ways. So measuring it in terms of, is it recyclable? Does it have access to be collected? Can people access those services? And are there end markets for those materials to ensure that they actually are in that circular loop? So it's really important to reflect that current capability and those various levels of activity in the system as well. And really, you know, if you are looking at being involved in this work, or something that you're building on, or looking at what you're doing and kind of thinking around, well, how could it be done differently? I can't underestimate the value of having that independence and having a very agile management and governance structure to respond effectively to what is a constantly changing environment. It's not the kind of system that you can set up and then walk away from. It needs constant love and attention, and you know, to be able to really adapt to that very agile need to respond to current systems, etc. In terms of international standards around compostable and biodegradable, this is a really, really important area. Even whatever one does in compostability, you need to have a very clear reference back to the standards, even if they're domestic standards. You know, it's great to have global ones and to be working on those, but it's a really important space in terms of overcoming the greenwashing element and the potential for really negative environmental impacts in this space if compostable packaging is not managed in an appropriate way and consumers don't engage with it and manage its collection in an appropriate way. And then if we really look at the second area of the guidance around delivering labels that adhere to the guidelines, you know, I think we like to think of it as like directing traffic for consumers. You know, it's not about a consumer, you know, isn't going to be particularly concerned on what a resin code is, or whether it's a 1, a 2, a 5, or a 6. What they need to know is, which bin do I put this packaging format in that's in my hand right now? So it's really directing that traffic for consumers. Does it go into your curbside bin? Does it go into a closed loop system? Does it need to be dropped off? And clear communication and understanding around that is really fundamental. So is having the whole supply chain represented, and having that advice being informed by a really diverse group of stakeholders. So we operate in our program the Technical Advisory Committee, and our Technical Advisory Committee is represented equally across the whole packaging value chain, from raw material producers to packaging manufacturers to brand owners to retailers to government to consumers and NGOs and community groups. And this is really important to make sure that the messaging that comes through your program is actually representative of a really broad and diverse group, and is taking into consideration all of those kind of aspects. The chasing arrows, you know, a couple of the other speakers have touched on that. And it is it is really important, if you are going to be using those, that they are provided with really clear directions. I always like to think of the cereal box example. People go, well, the cereal box is easy. It's mostly made from cardboard. So yep, that can just go in your recycling bin. The reality is that quite often they have, a plastic bag in them as well. And that's not always something that can go in a curbside recycling bin and might have to go be returned to store or to a different drop-off centre or some type of that nature. So it's a really good example where you need to have clear instructions, but you also need to have a component-based labeling. So it's no point in having one symbol. You have to have a symbol that represents the various components in your packaging to ensure that that consumers are actually engaging with that packaging format in an appropriate way that's actually going to enable it to be recovered and recycled as effectively as it can be. And just, in terms of digital technology, it's really important that, on-pack labeling is a highly effective way of communicating with consumers, but it's really important to have reference to that URL on the pack as well. And we have it next to all of our logos, our labels, I should say, and that's really important to ensure that people can access further information, etc., all those kind of things. There is a really interesting space in the technology area around getting caught up in building lots of kind of technology interventions. I would just say, don't build a field of dreams. Really think about what it is that consumers are doing with their packaging formats, how they're engaging with it, really understand the audience well. Sometimes one can create costly technical interventions that don't actually deliver as much value as one would think, because people are engaging with it differently. So it's really important to use technology where it's appropriate and where it's going to be effective, but make sure you're ticking that box when you're also looking at that on-pack labeling. But I think I'll hand back to Nishita and continue the panel.
Thank you very much, Brooke, for sharing your perspectives. And we can progress to the next slide, please. So we're now going to spend a few minutes with our speakers with a discussion on how different stakeholders can play a role to improve the landscape of sustainability communication and prevent consumer confusion within the landscape of labels and claims on plastic packaging. We've already been having a great discussion already, tapping into a few of these issues. And I would also like to encourage our participants in the webinar to use the Q&A function for your comments or questions, and given time, we may highlight a few. So to start off, I'd like to open up the discussion with a question on what steps you are individually taking to improve consumer information and to reduce consumer confusion on plastic packaging. If I can start with Anne-Sophie for your comments or insights briefly.
Thank you, Nishita. A lot of basically the actions that we can take and have been already mentioned, but I'll highlight a few. For sure, as a consultancy, what we see is basically the importance of raising awareness of all of these topics to the marketing, communication, sales, and biz dev communities inside companies. Usually, the people who drive these topics are the packaging R&D working on eco-design. But then this knowledge about what are the steps that are being taken to really properly design packaging, that all the way to the thinking of what it is going to become at the end of life has to be transferred to the marketing communities, who are the ones who are changing the packaging, writing what needs to be written on the packaging, and are coming with their constraints, which is, for example, how do I communicate on pack while my product is actually internationally sold and I have like multiple languages to cater for and I have no space and it costs money to redo packaging, etc., etc. So there's a lot of considerations here when you start discussing these matters with marketing communities, and I think one of the ways that we can really influence is the work we do with our with the businesses, with our clients, with our brands, to really inform, make sure that your guidance actually is well known, and use all these principles in any type of communication material, any communication strategy we put together. And of course, in all of the different activations and tactics that we can reach out to consumers now. And Brooke, you mentioned how digital can help. There's so many ways today to provide information to consumers about these things. And one of the questions in the chat was about, for example, does that change anything if we provide consumers with information? And yes, it does. Basically, when you look at consumer profiles, and even the ones that are least informed or the least interested in these topics, the first action they're looking to do is to recycle and dispose of properly the packaging once they've consumed the product. So the least a brand can do is actually to inform properly about disposal information and recyclability information. And there are many ways now with technologies and geolocalization to provide that information. So I'll stop here now. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. And we have a question in the chat box for Ulf. Here it's saying, that they have a question that if you don't build trust, people don't sort, and therefore we have to make sure that recycling actually happens, which is very true. How would you comment on the availability of data on export management and recycling of plastic? Do we have enough data, and are they easily available to assess the situation? Ulf, if I can come to you to share your insights on that question.
Yes, there is a problem of data, but there's also a problem of a black market. The Basel Convention regulates some of the exporting of plastic waste, but there will be changes in that convention, making sure that only when there's a guaranteed recycling taking place in the country where it is shipped to, will be allowed. So still you got the market surveillance problem there, but with that we will ensure that there is no misuse, as we have seen it in the past, that plastic waste meant to be recycled is shipped to some other countries, continents, and with no recycling taking place somewhere there. So that has to be ensured, which is not easy for a government to ensure that. But to build trust, it's absolutely necessary. When people read news on this shipment of plastic waste and found somewhere on beaches maybe, and most of the time the waste can be identified where it comes from, because some types of packaging are only available on the German market, on the US market or French market, and so you can identify, and if people read that, then they are not willing to sort it anymore, and it's understandable. Why should they sort in their household, provide different bins, which doesn't add to their comfort in their home, and then maybe they don't have too much space available for that. So then they are not willing to participate, and there the recycling schemes are obliged to just ship plastic waste when it's guaranteed that it can be recycled. So there have to be contracts and so on, and that's something we just regulated, I think, last year.
Thank you, Ulf. Given that we're coming to an end at our webinar, I'd like to finish the panel discussion with a final question to Brooke about how we can more broadly implement these key messages and on tackling consumer confusion. So over to you, Brooke, for a quick intervention on that,
I think
please?
one of the key things is to recognise that a labelling program is actually a behavioural change program, and that means you really need to think about how you engage with individuals, and how you do that on multiple platforms and channels is really essential. Recognising that you're going to have different audiences, business, government, and all of those, and consumers. You know, a couple of ways in which we do that effectively. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a full education program that sits behind our labelling program. And that includes everything from schools having the program and understanding it in their curriculum, to various social media efforts that happen on a regular basis, and then really public forums where we talk about the messaging and what it means as well, such as billboards and trains. We had a recent program here in Australia. We've got about 26 million people in this country, and we've reached nearly 60 million of them, you know, over a couple of months, you know, in terms of with some train advertising. So, you know, there's lots of different things you can do to really engage your audience, but it's really recognizing that that message that you're saying has to be said again and again, and the amplification of it is what will actually deliver the greatest value. So say it once, say it twice, say it 5 times, keep saying it until people really get, you know, which bin to put things in and how to sort appropriately.
Thank you very much, Brooke, and thank you all for engaging in this discussion. We can go to the next slide, please. So the key messages and case studies are available for free download on the Consumers International and One Planet Network website, and on our Consumer Information and Plastic Packaging Hub page, which we will put a link to in the chat shortly. All the outputs of the consumer information programs as Plastics Work will contribute to the One Planet Network-wide Plastics Initiative and be presented at the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly. And we really encourage you to share the key findings and messages within your networks. I would now like to pass on to Nils to close the webinar, and a thank you again to our panelist speakers for sharing your perspectives, to everyone involved in the development of these papers, and to everyone who has joined us today. We're on the last slide, that's fine, and we can go over to Nils to close the webinar. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Nishita, also for your moderation and presentation of the key messages, and to all our 3 speakers, Brooke, Anna-Sophie, and Ulf, for their great inputs and insights, for sharing their expertise today. I think we had a very interesting session, and I thank all the attendees for joining. Also, I like that Anne-Sophie, for example, also mentioned the challenges in the e-commerce space in terms of providing product sustainability information there, which becomes more and more important with our shift of consumption to online shopping. And I'm happy to say that we will be working on that as well in the consumer information program. So feel free to visit our website or follow our newsletter or reach out to us at ciscp@un.org. Thank you all and have a good day. Bye-bye.